Welcome to Meet the Falcons special edition today. Here we're joined by Jeremy Schumacher, Concordia, Wisconsin's mental wellness coach. Thank you for joining me, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Before we get into Mental Health Month and Mental Health Week by the NCAA, let's kind of give some of the people your background and where you graduated from and kind of how we got to the position that you're in now. You have an undergraduate degree from Minnesota in psychology.
Yep.
Then you went to Marquette and earned a master's degree in counseling psychology, and you're a licensed marriage and family therapist from the Family Therapy Training Institute. Kind of rewind a little bit and talk about, I guess, how did psychology and the counseling career path come to?
I guess I went to Minnesota for their psych program. They're very well known for psychology, top 3 in the nation in research. They have a lot of the well-known stuff in the psychology world is through them. They do the twin study, which I got to work on in my undergrad a little bit, which was cool. They came up with MMPI, which is big personality test. So I think because it was a well-known school for what I wanted to do, that's kind of what drew me. My dad was the guidance counselor, so we went on a visit. I got into, I forget how many schools I applied to, but that was the first one we went and visited, and I saw campus and was like, all right, I'll go here. And my dad was kind of like, you need to see some other stuff. And I was like, nope, this is good. So just fell in love with campus, really liked the vibe up there, and they have a really good program. So it was a really good fit. And then kind of going through my undergrad, just narrowing down what I liked about psychology, what I wanted to do with it. Like I said, I got to work on the twin study, which was really cool, but research wasn't necessarily my jam. I knew I wanted to work with people on a more one-on-one or face-to-face basis. So that's kind of how I ended up getting my master's in counseling psych. And from there, had a really good internship, got to do some marriage therapy and some couples counseling type stuff in my internship in my master's program, and decided to go on to the Family Therapy Training Institute from there, just because I really enjoyed the couples counseling, and I liked the dynamic of multiple people and focusing on their interactions more than just one person. Not that I didn't like working with one person, but I liked the complexities of multiple people and then how this person affects this person's behavior.
So you were a men's club volleyball player at Minnesota. How are you able to use that background with volleyball and what the student athlete expects on a day-to-day basis, or what they go through, and being able to use that here at Concordia, Wisconsin to help the student athlete?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of my background in therapy and then being able to relate to what the student athletes go through, both being an athlete myself and as a coach, knowing kind of firsthand what we expect of our student athletes, what their time commitment is for academics and weightlifting and all that other stuff. Just having that firsthand knowledge of knowing this is how you can balance it, having lived it, but also working with players who had already gone through it and already dealt with it. I was part-time at Concordia for 2 years. Yeah, 2 years before I started full-time. So I had already worked with enough student athletes and had them go through the system a little bit to know what to expect. And I think just when you look at, not throwing shade at our counseling department, just the reality of it is I'm younger than a lot of the other counselors we have. So I think there's that relatability for that too. That was a big thing in all of my psychology work. Just being a little bit younger, you attract that younger crowd because they're more comfortable working with somebody who's closer to their own age.
Specifically, I want to talk at the Division III level. Division I, sometimes they have more resources. They're able to maybe have more counselors. Specifically at the Division III level, the amount, I don't have a number, but the amount of mental wellness coaches, I can't imagine is that great a number. How important is it for Concordia to, I guess, get ahead of the curve, to have you in your position to help our student athletes?
Yeah, I think it's a really big deal. I think when you think of the resources of a Big Ten D1 school, obviously it's a big difference from what we have, but the number of student athletes they have is not that different from what we have. So when you think of the number of kids going through a program, kids having those same issues, mental health doesn't discriminate between a D1 or a D3 athlete. And so I think having the resources available is really important regardless of where it is. Obviously some funding comes into it, and that's just the reality of the world. But I think it's really big for kids to have the opportunity to have that outlet, somebody who's there for them on a performance basis, or somebody who's there for their mental well-being if they're dealing with a significant mental health issue.
So for those that I guess maybe not understand what a mental wellness coach does at an athletic department, could you describe from maybe a week-to-week basis some of the things that you handle or oversee?
Sure. Most of what I've been doing so far, and this position is pretty new still, has just been individual counseling. So working with athletes one-on-one, and that could be anxiety, depression, school, homesick, roommate problems, relationship problems, whatever, just that normal mental health stuff that a kid would go see a therapist for. Or I do a lot of work with athletes who are dealing with injury, or athletes who maybe are struggling with their performance on the field. So getting stuck on something. We work on visualization and mindfulness, trying to get them ready for game day, a lot of that stuff. And then our AT department's awesome, and they are in good contact with me. So I work with a lot of kids who are injured because that can be really detrimental. I mean, we don't have a lot of red shirts at our level. We don't have a lot of ways to save a season if you get injured. So it's kind of dealing with that loss of the ability to play that sport that you love.
Can you talk specifically about, it's kind of over the last couple of years, it becoming, as you've said, you and I have talked, normalizing this and having discussions about it. What an athlete maybe goes through when you get injured and say you're a starter and also now you can't play for a week or two, or all of a sudden you're trying to manage finals coming up, and having 4 or 5 finals in a week, trying to study for that, or even just say you're from 5 states away, trying to adjust in training camp from 2-a-days, practice and meals, getting learned new teammates, but being so far away from home if you're a freshman. How important is it to have you and to be able to just discuss this openly with teammate to teammate, or just having a sit-down conversation with you?
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to have just a presence on campus where kids know like it's okay to talk about this stuff. I mean, the research plays out where student athletes tend to seek help less regularly than other students do. And that could be because they're too busy, but I think a lot of it becomes like your mental health is a very personal thing. And so I think it's harder to talk about than other things that you might be struggling with. If you hurt your wrist, you get a cast put on it, everybody can see that you're hurt. If you're depressed, you look like everyone else. You look normal, for lack of a better word, but you might really be struggling. And so I think a lot of people, because it's such a personal thing, try and deal with it on their own. They try and take it by themselves. And so having my position, trying to be out there, I try to get in front of as many teams as I can in preseason or at the start of the year, whatever it is, just so they know it's okay. They don't have to go it alone. And we have a lot of really great resources. So they can come talk to me, but I'm pretty aware of what's going on campus as far as academic resources, other things we have on campus for students that they might need. So trying to get them plugged in if they're not working with me or they don't need something specifically from me, still getting them plugged into what they need, whether it's another resource on campus or just how to talk to their coach or how to talk to other teammates. So it's trying to get them the help they need, whatever that looks like. I don't have a set, all right, we're going to do therapy for 6 weeks and then this is going to happen. It's really based on what the student athlete needs. And that's what I like about this job, going from marriage and family therapy, where it's very complex and it's very different. There's a lot of overlap with this too, where each kid I work with is different and they're coming in with different needs. Each team has a different dynamic. So that part's really fun for me. It keeps it very interesting and challenging in a way, but rewarding at the same time.
In the last year and a half since August of 19, when this position came to, how have you seen the student athlete population at CUW, I guess, change or evolve to accept that if you need to talk about mental wellness in any capacity, I mean, there's a lot of different tentacles under that umbrella. It's okay to do that. Because in years past, it's something that you compartmentalize and you just don't talk about it. Have you seen the change in the last year and a half with your position now to basically just openly discuss it? If I have an issue, let's talk about it. Yeah,
I think younger students are more open about it. I think that's going to continue to be the trend culturally. Just the more as a society we're aware of mental health issues, the more comfortable kids are. I'll have freshmen walk in and start telling me their diagnoses they got from other therapists, and they just kind of are open books, which is awesome. And then I'll work with some kids who are still very tentative about it. So I think the general trends are each year is a little bit more open about it. And you have some big things. There was just a story that came out this past week about a student athlete who had contemplated suicide and was seeking help. The past year, I've seen a couple big NBA players talk about not specifically what they're going through, but that they're in counseling. The professional sports teams all have their own sports psychologists now. So I think it's getting normalized, especially on the sports side of it, that, hey, this is a good thing to do, even if it's just for your performance, even if it's just a check-in. It's a really good thing to do. And so I think kids are open to that. I've had the opportunity, which has been really cool, and I think is really good about the leadership at Concordia, to work with a lot of team captains on specific leadership type things, which has been awesome. So I think the kids see it as a resource and they want to better themselves however they can. So whether it's strength and conditioning training with Rustin, whether it's extra film with their coach, whether it's meeting with me, whatever resources they have to be at the top of their game, they're going to take advantage of it. So that's been cool to see.
How have you taken this new COVID life that we're living in, and what is the new normal as people are talking about? How have you taken this and having to transition to the student athlete to discuss maybe not playing their sport, not practicing anymore? Have you had some of those discussions, and maybe what are you telling them to stay mentally fresh, mentally well?
Yeah, it's been a lot of just kind of mindfulness, trying to stay in the present moment, take it day by day. We don't know what next month is going to look like. We don't know what next week's going to look like. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves about seasons getting canceled or any of that stuff. It's been a lot of control your controllables, which is a thing I go back to a lot. Focus on the things that are under your control. Try not to stress about the things that you can't control. So school's been a big thing. It's been a huge adjustment for a lot of kids. So there's been a lot of stress related to that. So it's processing that. And then really promoting staying in touch with their team, because that's a huge support system that kids are separated from. So working with it both on the mental wellness coaching part of it with the kids that I work with through that, but also with our team. We've just done a lot of setting up and structuring time for them to get together as a team. Our team does a ton of mindfulness anyway, but bringing that to the other teams and trying to promote that as best I can, and work through the students that I work with to take it to their teams too, has been really helpful.
I want to ask you, it is National Mental Health Month.
Yep.
In the NCAA, specifically at the Division III level, this week, Mental Health Week. Why is it important to have, I guess, a designation for a month and a week to promote, well, not promote is a good word, but to bring attention to these issues, I guess, or this topic, and talk about it or write about it, or whatever the case is? Why is it important to designate a certain time to have this out there?
Yeah, I think it opens it up and makes it easier for people to share. Maybe people who are further along in the process are more comfortable bringing it up, but just that people go through it. It's not this weird fringe, unique thing. And that's what happens a lot of times with specific mental health issues. Anxiety, depression kind of attack your brain in a way that say, you're not good enough, or this is a deficiency you have. And so it's not easy to talk about. And so taking some time and having people raise awareness, say, hey, this is the thing I struggle with. The idea being that a player might see a teammate or see somebody who's this D1 athlete that I follow on Instagram is talking about something that I totally relate to. That's crazy. I thought they had the perfect life. So just trying to raise that awareness and normalize a lot of this experience. I mean, a third of the population is dealing with a mental health issue. It's not a unique thing. It's not a rarity. It's pretty common. It's on every single team we have. So, but the kids who are really struggling with it, they get in their own head and they don't think that they're, a lot of these disorders convince them that it's their problem, it's their fault, it's their own thing to deal with. And so I think it's really important to take a whole month on a national level. And that's awesome that the D3 is taking this week to really try and break those stigmas attached to it, that you have to do it alone or there's something bad or wrong about having a mental health issue. I think it's just as important as taking care of your physical body. You got to take care of the mental part.
How do you go about explaining to somebody who may not know? Like you mentioned before, if you have a wrist injury, you throw a cast on 4, 5, 6 weeks. you take it off, you're back in action. How do you go about explaining to maybe somebody that if you have depression or anxiety or whatever issue that you may have, that it may not last a week or two. It could be a prolonged thing that you have to work at, like you have to work at the strength side to keep your body in top shape. How do you go about explaining that to somebody who may not understand?
Yeah, I have a lot of metaphors. I think the big one that I use is I compare it to gardening. And the kids who have worked with me are going to just roll their eyes that I'm bringing it up in this interview because they've heard it all before. But it's like you got to plant healthy things and nurture those things, water them, but you also have to do weeding. You got to get the bad stuff out. If there are rocks or things in the soil that aren't good, you got to get those out. So it's a process. I compare it to a physical injury a lot. That makes sense for a lot of kids too, just that you have this recovery process, you have to rest, you have to let it heal, and then you have to do rehab. It's not this thing where it's just, okay, you hit this checkpoint and now you're cleared to go play. There's a process in place. That's where I see a lot of difference in kids. Just the knowledge they have about mental health is pretty vast. They don't always know how to apply it to themselves is where I can be helpful a lot of the times, but they're familiar with depression. They know what anxiety is. They know these general concepts pretty well. The ins and outs of it, they might not know as well, or how to handle it, they might not know as well. But most kids aren't surprised when I say, oh, you're struggling with depression or you're dealing with an anxiety disorder. They know and kind of know what it entails. So I don't run into, it's less now than it used to be that I run into a kid who's like really struggling with it. Sometimes on the injury front, it can be frustrating, especially those unseen injuries. It's just a totally different thing than having a cast on to have a concussion. Like you want to be playing, you look like yourself, but you can't. And that's when kids really get in their own heads about it. Like that fact that they look healthy, but they're on the sideline. They feel like they're letting their team down or they can't contribute the way that they want to. So just working on setting realistic expectations is really important. Sometimes kids are good at that naturally through the process of being in sports their whole life. And sometimes they've been blessed to be on a championship team every year and be the MVP. And now they're like, I can't play. What am I supposed to do? So for some kids, it's brand new. But a lot of kids are pretty aware of the process behind it. And like I said, I like language and the fun things we can do with language. So I use a lot of metaphors. We do storytelling, kind of how do they re-author their own story and take some ownership over it. So definitely techniques that I learned throughout the therapy process and really fine-tuned there. It's therapy and coaching are very similar. There's a lot of overlap in the skills that I use there.
For NCAA Division III Mental Health Week this week, obviously we're doing an interview with you now. Wednesday, you and I will be back. We're going to have a couple of athletes kind of in a joint group. We'll just talk about some issues that they may have been through and kind of how they've helped themselves or their teammates. And then on Friday, you're going to have an article coming out on some tips about academics and maybe just getting outside and trying to get some fresh air in this time of being stuck inside. Some of the things that we're doing this week for Mental Health Week. So we appreciate everything that you do for our student athletes and the time that you take to improve their mental side of the game. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you back on Wednesday and then your article for Friday. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you.